the Jack Singer Concert Hall. This is the home of the Calgary Philharmonic, and they play musical instruments, classical musical instruments, and everyone has their favorites. Maybe you're a piano man, maybe you're a fiddler on the roof, whatever it may be, we want to put them into order for you, and that's why we're doing our next top 10 on the orchestra. To get a better understanding of the Calgary Philharmonic, we're sitting with Runa, music director and professional conductor of the CPO. And we are in the conductor's suite, right?
Yeah.
Only this man gets access to this suite. And it's pretty sweet, let me tell you. So, as a professional conductor, how did you come about that line of profession? You just love music all the time?
Oh wow, it's actually a little special story because I was very young and I don't know why, but I had something dragged me to classical music. It was an interest, but there was I grew up in a tiny little place in Norway and there was not even close to a professional orchestra there. But I had something was interesting, and my father woke me up one morning and said, there is a concert on television if you would like to see it. So I got up, and this was then the New Year's concert from Vienna. And one of the most fantastic conductors of all times, Carlos Kleiber, he was conducting this concert. And they did the Fledermaus Overture, and I think about 10 seconds after we started, I turned to my parents and said, this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I mean, this is, music comes in many tempos and different patterns, but it's like, maybe the most common one is the 4/4. This is one measure within those lines here, and then there's the second and the third. And the score depends how many instruments it's made for.
When you're trying to get their attention and you're like hitting the podium, you don't do that.
No, I mean, in the old days they did like this to have their attention, but today musicians, they know the drill, so whenever the stick comes up, their instruments go straight to position.
That's powerful. That's almost like a magic wand. So you can just swish and flick your way to music.
So I can actually change the sound in an orchestra just by doing like this. And that comes with experience. And if I go up, it sounds brighter. And if I want the woodwinds, sometimes when they are playing along, I can go up here to them and give them maybe more clear beats. So you have to, it's like in a football team, you have to play on the same team. You have to want to win. You have to want to go the same direction. So I think making music with the symphony orchestra has a lot in common with sports. It has a lot of common with life in many ways, that we have to just work well together. We have to share the same passion for music. And so I think most important for me is to inspire them.
For our next instrument, it's kind of a funny story because they're not technically part of the orchestra, but it's really weird because they're featured so prominently with so much classical music. And that's why we're talking to Carl, resident conductor and formerly trained pianist. How are you doing today, Carl?
Good, Rolf. How are you doing?
You know what? I am finding so much about all these different instruments, but it's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah, well, I mean, when the idea of the orchestra originally started, it was mainly just the strings in the orchestra, and then wind instruments would be added sort of one at a time, and over many years, the evolution of the symphony got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so you don't have to have proficiency or a high level of knowledge at the piano, but it definitely helps. And for me, being a pianist, someone who has been playing the piano since I was a kid, that's definitely the center of my musical world, and it is the tool that I use even when I'm studying repertoire that I'm going to be conducting. It's the tool that I use to learn the music and really get an idea of how it sounds. For me, there's something, and maybe this is just because of the journey that I've been on as a pianist, there's something about playing the piano that is almost kind of isolating, or maybe I should use the word independent or individualistic. You know, cellists will always complain that they have to and rightfully so. But they have to, when they're traveling on an airplane, they have to get an extra ticket for their cello because they can't put it underneath with the cargo. So that's not really feasible with a grand piano, but I mean, at the same time, it's also a challenge because you go somewhere and you're playing a concert and you have to play a piano that you've never played before. So that sometimes can be a little bit daunting, but at the same time, sometimes it can be exciting if it's a really great instrument. It's a real privilege to play on it.
Our next instrument is played by Gene, and he plays principal oboe.
Yes.
And here it is.
This is it, with the reed.
Now, the reed, is there anything special about that?
Well, the really special thing about it is that if you don't have one, can you hold that for a second? This is what you get. Nothing. So you really have to have the reed. It has sort of a plaintive quality, somewhat, I don't want to say mournful, but aching maybe, or at times sorrowful. Beethoven's Sixth in the Scherzo movement, the Sixth Symphony, it's sort of a peasant instrument. In that same movement, actually, the clarinet has a fabulous part too, but that's more of a village tune type things. Yeah.
You know what? In that little second, I was transported there with you. I thought I was about to, toss my hat off.
Excellent.
And that's one thing that music really does, is transport you, right? And
well, time stops still. There is no time anymore. It's just you're sort of immersed in this sound, and I guess transport is the word. You're someone. You're not reading a book. You're sort of immersed in this sound. I don't know how to describe it. Yeah.
Because absolutely, the sound triggers something within your memory that you recognize that for somewhere, and a little bit of your history and experience all comes together and makes the music enjoyable, I think.
You're starting at one point, and after you listen to all this music at the end, you're probably at a different point. You somehow feel or moved or somehow touched, and a little bit different maybe after.
Our next instrument is another woodwind, and we're going to speak to Michael Hope, assistant principal bassoon. How are you today?
I'm awesome. How are you doing, Rolf?
Well, I got through that, so I'm starting on the right foot.
Well, most people don't even know what a bassoon is, so you're way ahead of the game so far.
But that's not unique to me. Look at this thing. It's very
Isn't it gorgeous,
alien.
Huh?
And you were saying that it is it's a historic piece,
Yes,
right?
it is, yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit more about the nature of this bassoon and why it works really well
For what I do, yeah, of course. Well, this is a vintage Heckel bassoon, serial number 5611. And for context, the current serial numbers of bassoons are into like the 16,000s. This is a 5000 series instrument. It was manufactured in 1920 in a place in Germany called Biebrich am Rhein. Well, I started playing the clarinet in my elementary school band. But when I first saw the bassoon and when I first heard it, I kind of fell in love. And just not just with the creamy, unusual sound, but also the fact it was so goofy looking, right? And sometimes I bring this to parties just to start conversation. So, and that distinguished me as a man of class, I think.
And creativity, right?
Yeah.
Because, not only do you pick such a unique and personal instrument, there's something very special about each reed that you use.
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Reeds are the mini instruments which produce the vibrations on the bassoon. So these are bassoon reeds. You see that I've actually put numbers on them to let me know which ones are which, because each of them has a different character. If an orchestra or a woodwind section were a house, the second bassoon would be the rock-solid basement foundation, holding everything together, establishing the foundation for the rhythm and for the intonation and the security for all those things that are built on top of it.
Now, our next instrument is one of my favorites as well. It is very unique in its sound, and Adam, principal trumpet, is going to tell us all about it. This is it, right?
Yep, this is the trumpet.
Now it's only got 3 keys. I've seen winds with like a dozen keys and more.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
it's very diversified in what it can do.
Yeah, the trumpet's a very versatile instrument, even though you tend to think of more bravura, heraldic things when you think of the trumpet. Now, we can get by with just the 3 buttons because we can play lots of notes without any buttons at all.
That's amazing. I had no idea it could do that.
Yeah, that's why the trumpet was a feasible instrument before the valve was able to be manufactured at a quality and a cost that was feasible for musical instruments. So back in the time of Bach, the trumpet was longer than this, but it had no valves, and you had these virtuosic, high clarino trumpet parts that we still play to this day, usually on modern instruments, sometimes on old-style instruments, but with no valves at all. So when we're playing a brass instrument, we're never actually literally singing into the instrument and using our vocal cords to make a sound. The vibration's all coming from our lips.
It's very iconic in its sound. Like, I don't think a battle can start without a trumpet. Is that not correct?
That's right, yeah. I mean, there are several explicit battle scenes in the orchestral repertoire, and they all start with trumpets. One, in Ein Heldenleben by Richard Strauss, there are 3 offstage trumpets that play this fanfare, and then the battle starts properly on stage, and there's another trumpet playing this big, fat, aggressive solo that's a lot of fun to play and really iconic in the repertoire.
And that is part of why it's a principal instrument, right? Like, it's, would you say that it's more of a soloist? Like,
Well, the trumpet's used in a lot of different ways in the orchestra, both as a solo instrument and as the top voice, the leader of the brass section. The highest instruments within any group of instruments tends to really lead the sound of that group. So very often the whole brass section will be playing together, but I'm going to be the one playing the top line, the melody, most of the time.
and now you said a lot of bravado, heroics. Is that the emotion that most instills in people when they hear a trumpet?
Yeah, that's what most people think of, and that's what we're doing a lot of the time in the orchestra. But it's a very versatile instrument and can make one of the most beautiful vocal tender sounds in lyrical soft playing of all of the instruments, I think. It bears a lot in common with the human voice.
Our next instrument is a fan favorite, and one of mine as well. And that's why we've come to talk to Steve, second section, about the violin. But you called it a fiddle.
Yeah, it's slang. I sometimes call it a fiddle. That's what we do sometimes when we're working.
What's the difference between them?
Nothing much, really. I guess maybe a couple of adult beverages.
It's a beautiful instrument, and it's very dainty. What made you choose it?
The sound. And as well, I remember being in kindergarten. I remember one of my students, or not students, but one of my colleagues at the time, she was playing the violin, and I just bugged my parents and I wanted to play. I just love the sound. Very similar to like you, basically our human bodies. I always tell my students or people that don't know about the instrument, we've got the scroll, it's kind of like our heads. We have the pegs, just like our ears. Then we have the neck. And then we have the belly of the instrument, just like our bellies. Then we have what were called the ribs that keep the front and the back together, just like our ribs. And the back, similar, very similar to our backs. And some backs of the instruments, whether they're cellos, basses, violins, they actually can come in two pieces, and you can see there's a big division right there, or a whole single piece, which is pretty cool. And then you have the bridge, and then you have our end pin, and then our tail piece. And this pretty much keeps everything together and keeps it taut or tightened on top of the box of the instrument. Yeah, it can be frantic. It can sound really frantic and really beautiful too. I mean, depending on where you put the bow, it can sound extremely crass and cruel, or sometimes it can sound as sweet as it possibly can, or as sweet as a voice.
If your instrument kind of got pigeonholed in a certain emotion, now we've gotten this from a lot of musicians that, no, it's everything. What are you talking about? I can play sad violin, I can play happy violin. You just let me know, or I'll be conducted. So,
Yeah.
But you know, there's a preference, right? Like a flute will have a higher note where, you know, a bass will be very low.
Yeah.
So where do you, emotionally do you feel like the violin is?
For me, because I chose the instrument and because a lot of the music I listened to when I was younger and still today, it represents joy. A lot of early music from Handel to Haydn to Vivaldi and Bach, there's a lot of joy in the music, and that's why I chose this instrument specifically, because it really gets to those high points and low points in the lower register and the high register, and it really can bring that out, that joy in me, as well as when I play it, and I try to do so.
And you know, historically, you've stacked the deck in case you ever have to make a deal with the devil, right?
Yeah.
You've got a better chance with the violin than any instrument, I think.
You know, if I can play it right, yeah, hopefully.
Now, we wouldn't have a very good top 10 list if we did not include Heather and the French horn section.
Of course.
This is it.
This
the
is
French
it.
horn.
What do you think?
It is a beautiful instrument. It's kind of the more compact tuba.
Well, they have similar lengths of tubing. I have about 14 feet in here all wrapped up of tubing. But it's a little more complicated than the tuba, so.
And it did look very intricate when you were kind of just fingering the keys, right?
Yeah, so we have a slightly different set of keys than the trumpet and the tuba. We have rotary valves, which are different than the piston valves that go up and down.
Mm-hmm. And so you had said that this was the best instrument off camera, obviously, but
Well-
I'm gonna call you on it. Why? What brought you to this?
Why? That's a good question. Well, I think, and a lot of people would tell you, that the horn is the soul of the orchestra. We sit right in the middle in the back, we're behind the winds, we're kind of close to the strings. We play in many different styles. We can play beautifully and brilliantly with the brass, we can blend and play delicately with the winds, we can sob with the strings. So we're kind of a chameleon instrument in many ways, with a huge range and many, many colors in the sound. It's very interesting. I mean, the horn, the section as a section is very much featured in a lot of music, especially in Mahler. Huge, big section. We have 10 players sometimes, 10 horn players at the back playing. So again, we're very much a chameleon. We can be front and center and playing as a quartet. There's beautiful, beautiful solos that are written for the principal horn. And again, we can also blend and support and just make everything sound better.
You're making me sound better.
So
right
we're
now.
like the all-star of the orchestra. This is what I'm thinking.
The MVP of the orchestra.
There you
You
go.
heard it first. Thank you so much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Our next instrument is an iconic one, and that's why we're speaking to Dave, principal bass trombone, about it. This is a beautiful instrument. I didn't even notice all those etchings in there.
Very beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, it's the engraving was handmade by a custom trombone shop in Massachusetts, S.E. Shires. I've had this trombone now for, about a dozen years or so.
And is that when you found the trombone, or you've been practicing for many years before that?
Oh, well, yeah, of course. I grew up around brass instruments. I was raised in a church that a lot of people don't even know is a church, called the Salvation Army, that has brass bands. So from a very early age, I had brass in my ear from infanthood. And so I was...
Not for hearing.
Well, no, but I mean, I heard it every time I got dragged out to church. I heard bands, brass bands. So it was natural for me to want to take up a brass instrument. We're more like the woofer. We're the drivers. We're the ones that put a lot of punch and sizzle to the bottom end of the orchestra. But we can also be its softest voice, its most lyrical voice. So the trombone's incredibly versatile. It can sound like a choir of angels, or it can sound like a herd of demons, whatever the composer wants to bring out of it. It's probably the most versatile instrument in the orchestra. Of course, I'm biased when I say that, but what other instrument will you find in rock bands, jazz bands, brass bands, pop bands, Mexican salsa bands, you name it. I mean, trombones are everywhere, more so than any other instrument. They have a place in just about every ensemble.
For our next instrument, we have Patrick here, and he plays the double bass section. How are you doing today, Patrick?
I'm doing well, thanks.
That is a huge guitar?
Well, this is a double bass. It is the largest member of the string family, as you can clearly see, and that's what I play.
So why did you choose the double bass? Is it just, it's such an impressive instrument when you pull it out, people are like, whoa, music's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's funny, I didn't actually choose it myself initially. It all kind of stemmed from a desire to play the bass guitar. However, my mother, who was a classically trained cellist, really saw the value in me also receiving some kind of classical music training. So the deal was I could play the bass guitar if I also started playing classical double bass lessons. So that's kind of how it all got started.
Are they even similar?
They are actually. The tuning system is the same.
Now, if the double bass had to convey an emotion, what do you think it would be?
It's pretty diverse, honestly. It really has a huge range, just in terms of pitches, but I think the way that most composers seem to want to use it in the classical repertoire is often to convey a sense of foreboding. It's got like this really dark low register that none of the other strings have, so it's often used to foreshadow tragic events or just really sinister sounds.
And that's what I would tend to lean towards as well, because I can't imagine like a happy
There's some happy stuff out there for sure.
Well, we'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Now, in the grand scope, the palette of the orchestra, where do you see yourself? Are you a glue or are you a soloist?
No, absolutely. I think we provide the literal base or foundation for the rest of the ensemble to sit on top of. So I very much like to think of the bass section as providing sort of the glue for everything else. It's really important that the section be very incredibly solid and together so that everything else can sort of sit nicely on top of that. So the glue would be a good way to put it.
The glue of the orchestra, my friend Patrick. Wonderful. Can you spin that? Slap in the bass. For our next instrument, we're going to be talking to Sarah Hahn, principal flute for the CPO. How are you doing today, Sarah?
I'm doing great.
Now, the flute, it's a very classical instrument.
Okay.
I think so. Whenever I see a flute, I think of an elevated music.
Okay, I like that.
Why did you choose it?
It's not quite that eloquent a story, but I was picking an instrument for my junior high band class in grade 7. And I had kind of narrowed it down between flute and tuba because I found tuba really easy to play and kind of fun. But my older sister plays the flute, played it at that time, and I kind of looked up to her. And my mom told me that, if you play the tuba, you're not going to have too many melodies to play. So she convinced me to play the flute.
But that was Mom's secret way to say, I don't want to buy 2 instruments. We have a flute. Play the flute.
And probably I don't want to buy a tuba. Yeah.
I don't want to clean a tuba.
Yeah.
So here it is. Let's take it out and take a look.
All right. It's the body, and I have a beautiful Nagahara flute. It's made of silver and platinum alloy mixed together. And then the head joint, this one is gold, as you can see. Various carats of gold. And we put it on kind of like that. And then, as you might have guessed, this is the foot joint. And we put it on like this.
Yeah, it's heftier than it looks.
Yes.
Like that's a solid.
Yeah, this is a heavy flute in particular.
Oh. You're saying that there's lighter ones?
Yes, because this is a silver, platinum, and gold. Some of the student flutes are made of even nickel or a little bit less precious metals.
I always thought that flute was kind of like a fancy recorder. Why don't you play the recorder?
Well,
because if you were charitable, you could have recorders across borders.
Yeah, the recorder is a lovely instrument, but I think the flute has a lot more power to it, a lot more variety to the colors of the sound. It's got a much bigger range than the recorder. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, and that's so funny that you say like a color, right? Because I've heard that theme brought up through many musicians is the color.
Yeah.
Is that kind of an inside terminology that you guys all get taught in
I
symphony
suppose
school?
that it is. It's kind of like the tone of your voice. It has a huge variety of sound. I think in the orchestra, more often than not, it's the pastoral or the kind of maybe the sadder or kind of more beautiful or more uplifting emotions.
Now, I know what you're looking at is what you think of when you think of classical music, and that's the cello. And we have David, the section cello. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing much better now that you brought this beautiful instrument in. This has always been one of my favorites, and I know I've said that 10 times already, but I'm telling you, this has such a beautiful sound. And maybe that's why you chose it. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, initially I started off playing the piano. That was when I was 8 years old, and when I joined the orchestra, it was with the piano, and I realized it wasn't really catching my attention, and I wanted something a little bit more labor-intensive, you know, something that was a little bit more involved instead of just sort of percussive. What I'd like to say is generally all instruments are basically trying to imitate one instrument, and the original instrument, which is the human voice. So every instrument that's on that stage, they are at some point they are imitating a song. You know, and so that's why I like to, when people often tell me like, oh, the cello, it's my favorite instrument. And I always like to kind of throw it back at them and say, well, why? And after they're done looking at me like, I've never been asked this question, I like to kind of blow their mind a little bit, pick at them a little bit and say, you know, maybe the reason that you love the cello so much is because it resembles the human voice the best. It has the same range as the human voice, and so people can identify with it a lot more easily than, let's say, the violin. Sure, the violin can sound like a person, but do you really want to hear someone singing that high all the time? So I often find people can identify with this because it's almost soothing to the soul because they can relate. I would like to say that the cello is the love and the passion that goes into whatever is being expressed on the canvas. That's what I like to think of the cello. The cello has a lot of raw emotions on the inside, and it always comes through, no matter what you're playing.
Growing up on the countryside, far away from any live music, and there was no Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, there was almost not a concert on television. So I didn't have that so accessible. And now you can actually get inspired if you really want to. And I think that's a good thing. And then I think this will drag people to the concert halls. And when they first get there, if you're able to relax when you sit down in a hall and just take it in, then it's when you will feel something that you have to go into nature, really far into the mountains and being totally alone. That kind of calmo and silence and relax. So I would say music, the magic of music is that it's therapy. You can be upset and you can be calmed down. You can be sad and you can go out happy. You can be happy and come in and then think about things that just makes you good. So I wouldn't be able to live without music. It's something that makes me happy every day.
And there you have it, our top 10 lists of orchestra instruments. But like we've heard before, any one of these instruments can be a 1 or 10 on any given day. I think the important thing that we should take away from this is that music needs to be experienced, and it needs to be experienced live. So I hope to see you in the seats at the next CPO. Until next time, I'm Rolf Johansson.